And welcome everybody to another in a series of song studies. This one is for My Heart Will Go On from the motion picture Titanic. A huge, huge hit for Celine Dion, an Academy Award, Grammy winner, and one of the greatest soundtracks of recent memory by the late, great James Horner, who died tragically in a plane crash several years ago. What a master of music this guy was, and Titanic is one of his great masterworks. So for the longest time, I thought about this tune, and when you're arranging music for the mountain dulcimer, one of the big questions is this going to be possible on this instrument? Because, you know, as a diatonic instrument, we're sort of limited to staying within the key, and we can't really pull borrowed chords and other notes, accidentals, into things as easily as chromatic instruments. And so, as you know, if you're a fan of the song, which I imagine you would be if you're in this workshop, you know there's a very dramatic key change at the end. And so for the longest time, I thought, there's just no purpose in trying to figure this out on the mountain dulcimer if I can't do the key change. And the more I thought about it, the more I thought, you know, we don't have to do the key change, and at least before the key change, this is actually a diatonic piece of music. So there's a bonus. Those of you who went into your workshop folders that I sent you, the links in Dropbox, when you go back in there, you're going to find the chromatic tablature for this as well. I don't know how many of you play chromatic dulcimer, but if you do, I did tab out the full chromatic version with the key change if you're interested in exploring that. But today we will be working on the diatonic version. Speaking of your links, please hold on to those links because I am recording this workshop and that video will be made available to you in that folder. So go there next week and you'll be able to go back and reference this video as you're working on the piece. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and open up that tablature if you haven't gotten it printed out already or on your screens. It's a page tablature. There's quite a bit of navigation to be looking at. And what I want to do before I actually play it for you is do what I call an exploration of the tablature. If I'm ever using somebody else's tab, of course I get very excited and I want to jump right into it and play it, sight read it. But what happens is we take a look at the music and we go, okay, I got this. And we're playing along, and then we'll get to a point where maybe there is an inverted chord or there's a combination of chord and melody that we're not familiar with, and we have to make a split-second decision on how to approach that, what fingers to use, that type of thing. And that can put a hiccup in our get-along, and it's a flub that we then have programmed into ourselves. So I like to go in with an informed point of view, know how I'm going to approach certain things before I actually get into it. So what I'm going to do right now is we're going to walk through and I'm going to show you some key things that you should be thinking about, and then you can review those things and work on your fingerings as I'm playing through. Okay, so I'm going to get into markup mode here, and let's take a look at some of the things that I always look at for every piece of music, starting off with, let me do this first. Okay, starting off with right here, we're going to look at, first of all, we are in DAD tuning. And we're looking at the key signature. There are two sharps, F sharp and C sharp, so we are in the key of D. And we are in 4/4 time, our time signature. So the top number is how many beats are in the measure, and that bottom number is what gets the beat, or the note duration that we are anchoring everything to. So 4 beats in the measure, and 4 stands for the quarter note, so the quarter note will get the beat. Then I take a look at the navigation. How are we moving through it? Are there repeats? Are there first and second endings? Let's have a look. First of all, right down here in measure 10, you can see that we indeed do have a pair of dots at the beginning of the measure. Those are our repeat symbols. So we're going to be looking for those at the end of a measure coming up here. So let's scroll through and see what we got. Whoops, let me get out of markup first. Okay, so page 2, nothing. Page 3, nothing. Page 4. Wow, there it is. Measure 45 at the first ending. So we're actually going to play a good deal. We're going to play through the verse. We're going to get into the chorus. And then that'll take us here to the first ending in measure 45. Of course, the first ending is like a gate. You can only enter once per time through the song. So there's our repeat symbols. We'll play to the end of that measure and then go all the way back to where we first saw those repeat symbols there at measure number 10. And then we'll play through all of that stuff again taking us to measure 44. Now, once again, we don't want to go back into the first ending. We already played it. So we'll go right from measure 44 to measure number 46, where the second ending is, and that takes us right to the end. Boom. First and second endings are great if you've got repeated sections of tune that don't hang different. And this saves page turns. If I hadn't used those, this would have been like an 8-page tab, and you guys would have been so mad at me, so I did that. And it's a pretty simple navigation. Just remember where you're going to be flipping back to. I really did try to cram it down to 3 pages, because I know we can at least get 3 pages sometimes on a music stand. But hopefully you can put this in your tablets with an air turn or something like that with Bluetooth, and do the page turns that way so you can flow through it. All right, now the next thing I look at after we've cleared up what the key signature, time signature is, and what the navigation that we're looking at, is to look at the measures and the chords and the notes themselves. Identify the things that you're not familiar with. You could perhaps look down here and see 310 and go, oh yeah, I play 310 all the time. That's not going to be a problem. But you might see like this 334 with a slide into the 5 and go, how do I want to do that? So this is a key time to kind of look around and see things that you may have to change up your normal approach. Maybe you use a certain type of fingering for this chord, but because this melody note's involved, you have to approach it with a different finger. It's things like that that'll make your first time playing through a lot easier. Now, I do want to point out something super important, and this is a key for those of you who'd like to make your own arrangements of tunes in the chord melody style. Chord melody basically means we're playing a chord and the melody is heard as well. And it's sort of a bit of hocus pocus, but the secret to doing that is to make sure that your melody is the highest pitched note in the chord. So it's got a foundation of the root note or the bass note, that middle note, and they both support the melody, and you can hear the melody very clearly because it's at a higher frequency, and so it'll cut through everything that's below it. So you want to keep that melody note as the highest pitched note in the chord, and that's very, very simple to do on a mountain dulcimer because typically we are playing that melody on the melody string. However, there are going to be times, and especially in this tab, where you're going to see something like this in measure 11, where there's a note on the top line for the bass string and there's a note on the middle string, but there's nothing below it. That means the melody is actually being played on the middle string. And in that case, we don't want to play anything higher because we want to keep the melody as the highest pitched note. So in those cases, you're actually not going to play all the way across and then drone that melody. You're only going to strum as far as the middle string. What I tend to do with that is I do an in strum. So I come in from the bass string and then I hit the middle string and I stop. It's a little more difficult to try and hit those two strings going outwards because you have to hop over the melody string to do so. It's not impossible, but it's a little bit more tricky to do that. The other thing that's nice about coming in is that the last string you hit is the melody, which means it'll be emphasized and make it pop even more. So this does happen quite a few times in the music. And specifically, it's happening in the verse, because we're looking for a lower tone for that melody. So you're seeing it's happening here in measure 15-16. It's also happening down here. It's also happening down here. So just be aware of those. And again, you only want to strum as far as that note. Same thing with that 4 by itself in measure 15. Sometimes the melody is going to actually be on the bass string, at which point you only want to play the bass string, just that note by itself. All right. Eek, I keep doing that. Okay. I'm looking for tricky things as well, and there really aren't except for these slides where you see SL with an arrow pointing from one of those numbers to another number. And that means simply that we're going to slide from the first of those numbers to the second one. And what that does is it creates a really nice lilt. It's a bit of an embellishment. And since the opening of this tune has got that wonderful pipe Irish whistle going on with the bends and everything. That's kind of what I was going for with the slippy slidey stuff. And you'll find that the more you slide on the mountain dulcimer, it's a habit that will leak into other pieces of music, and it's just a really nice little thing to have in your wheelhouse, is sliding. It's the only embellishment I've actually written into the piece. So continue to look at that. I'm going to go ahead and demo it for you. I'm going to play it from memory, and I'm going to be very dramatic about it. There'll be rubato moments where I'll speed up and slow down the time signature a little bit. You'll also see me doing a little bit of fill in on the bass string. Nothing big, but you'll see me doing some things to work with the dynamics and help things along. I didn't want to notate all that stuff because it just tends to clutter up a tablature, and what I wanted to give you was the bare essentials, which is melody, chords, and a few embellishments to make everything come together. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing the screen. And now I'm going to go over to Minicam and turn on the overhead camera. All right. And now here is My Heart Will Go On from the motion picture Titanic. All right, there it is. What a beautiful song. What just simply a gorgeous song all around. And I've actually tabbed out a couple of James Horner tunes, and if you are a big fan, I can add into your folders a piece of music, another award-winning piece of music he did for the motion picture The Land Before Time, which was an animated film about dinosaurs from Universal Pictures. But there's a song in there called If We Hold On Together that was a big hit for Diana Ross, and I've got that tabbed out. And I think I'll put that in your folders, and you guys can have a couple of James Horner tunes to work with. But right now, let's go ahead and take a look at our walkthrough of My Heart Will Go On. And I'm going to go measure by measure and sort of address some of the grips I'm using for the chords and some of the things that I dealt with as I put this stuff together. What I often do is I come together with this arrangement and I approach it from a theoretical standpoint. I listen to the piece of music and I capture the melody and the chords and I get them down on paper. And then I massage the arrangement so that a human being can actually play it. Because the theory doesn't always work for your fingers. You put it out there and it looks great on paper, but there's just no way that you're going to make some of this stuff happen. And that's the real challenge, is not getting it on paper, but smoothing it out to where it's playable and so it sounds, you know, reasonably like the original piece. And sometimes that's easy and sometimes it can be knuckle busting and frustrating. So let's go ahead and go through measure by measure. And I'll stop before we get to different sections and open up things to questions out there. These are all suggested fingerings, so feel free to use what's going to be more comfortable for you as far as what fingers to use and approach, and even alternative ways of playing some of this stuff here. Going into the open, very, very simple, coming up the melody string into our B minor, and right off the bat, the one thing we really want to do here as much as possible is keep these strings sustaining as long as we can. That means trying to keep our fingers on the same strings as long as possible so we don't have to remove them. If we take our fingers off the strings, that string's going to stop vibrating and sustaining, and it's going to cut the note off, and that creates choppiness, and we really want to avoid choppiness as much as possible, especially in a ballad, in a nice mellow piece of music. So oftentimes what I'm doing here is, even though you might see that 2-1-2 and realize that there's a half note tied to a quarter note, you'll also see that there's a couple of whole notes in there. And how is that working? It's my suggestion that you hold on to the bass string and the middle string for the entire measure, is basically what's happening there. I don't want you to play the bass string and middle string for 2 beats, 3 beats, and then stop, because that will choke those notes. So even if it's not written, it's usually implied that if nothing else is happening on the string in that measure, hold on to it as long as possible so that when you do have to do any changes, you've got cover for that and you can avoid as many breaks in the tune as possible. That said, in our first full measure, here's what I do for this 1-0 on the melody string. I want to hold on to that 2-1 badly. I don't want to do anything that's going to take my time away from that. So I'm using my pinky to get that 1. My pinky's just going to reach right down there and grab that 1 and then let go of it so I can keep that 2-1 going. And there's no break whatsoever. Then I can slide right into the 101. My index finger is going to stay on that string, come on down. I'm going to drop my thumb in on the 101. And then I'm sliding my thumb up to 4. Now, I do not have the hands of Tall Glazner, but I do have a pretty good reach, and sometimes I forget that not everybody's got that kind of a reach. And this came up yesterday. What if you're trying to hold on to that 1 and you just don't have the reach to get the 4? And what you can do there is, what we're doing is, and when you run across a problem like this in tablature, you can make your own corrections like this. Identify what it is we're trying to do, and what we're doing there is we're playing an A chord, and the melody, of course, is very important. We want to preserve the melody at any cost, and that melody at this point is on the melody string. So let's just take our A chord from 101, and instead of trying to slide a piece of it, let's slide the whole thing up to bar 4. That will keep us at an A5 to be exact, and we have hit our melody note. So you can go like this. So if you can't make the reach, that is how you can handle that and keep everything there. I prefer this sound because I like having that middle A droning there, and I also like having the lower pitched note on the bass string. But again, if you can't make the stretch, then it's a good reason to go from the 101 to bar 4, but you will still have to handle that 3-2. And it's going to be a little trickier if you're holding the bar. Not impossible. Your ring finger can come down and hit 3. And if you curl your fingers enough, you can get down there and get that too. Notice how I've pivoted and swiveled on the bass in the middle string. I'm still holding those notes. See how much I'm getting away with there? I do this a lot in order to use my ring finger and pinky to grab other notes. It's just a matter of pivoting. So you don't always have to keep your fingers parallel to the frets. If you can get away with doing a bit of a pivot, you'll get a bit more reach. And if you look at the inset of the video, you can see how much my elbow swings out to allow for that wrist action. I do that a lot. Sometimes it looks like I'm taking flight on stage because I'm doing this kind of thing going on. All right. So yeah, from the 4, you can grab it, but it'll be a little trickier than if you were to go coming down from the 4 that way. Getting into the 3-1-0 and then sliding that down to 1-0, only going as far as 0. Our B minor using the pinky on 1. Okay, we've covered how to handle this. 2, 4, and then we get into our first slide. We're going to hit that 3-3-4 and then slide it immediately up into the 5. Nice little grace note there. And like I said, once you start doing this with your other chords, you're never going to stop doing it. It's just a really nice lyrical addition you can make there. And then we're going to walk that 4. Now, real quick, let me just show you. In that measure with the 3-3-4, it's an L-shaped G major chord. I bar all of my L-shaped chords. So I've got my fingers in a bar across the 3rd fret, and then I'm coming up 2 frets and putting the top of the L in there. And the reason I do that is for situations like this. Sometimes your melody is going to walk right down to that bar. You're going to have to put that ring finger in there anyway. And other times, the melody will go beneath the bar, which means that the ring finger can come down to the 2nd fret and pick up that note. So that happens more often than not, and I've just gotten used to the idea of barring my L-shaped chord, so all I have to do is lift my thumb, and that note is right under my finger at the 3rd fret, and then I can even walk it down to the 2nd fret. So when it comes to that slide, my thumb comes down to get 4, and my ring finger comes down to get 2. All the while I'm holding on to that bass and middle string, and then sliding into the 101, and that's our intro. We get into now the verse at the A part. Watch my technique as I strum inwards to get these melody notes on the middle string. So I came in. Then I will go outwards on the melody string. Okay, I'll do that again. Pinky gets the 1. Going to page 2. That 4 right there, that is a melody note. So just play it by itself and then slide this down to 3-1. Bring in that O at the end, and then let's take a look at what's happening in measure 17. This is not canon. This is just a way of keeping time through this measure, because that last note that is sustaining actually begins in measure 16 at the beginning of that measure. And it's going to hold for 2 measures before it comes back in at measure 18. And there's nothing else going on there. So if we didn't do something, if we didn't put something in there, the song would come to a complete and total halt for 2 measures. So we actually chill out with it a little bit for that first measure, and then I introduce just a little figure to keep things moving. You can junk that. You can put whatever you want to in there. That was just my way of filling time. It's not an actual part of the tune. It's not canon. So feel free to rearrange that and add your own flourish or whatever you want to do right there. My feelings won't be hurt at all. It's just something I did to keep things moving. Measure 18. Pinky on the 1. Measure 22. And then we get into the B section. I'm going to stop for a second and mention a couple of things. First of all, I will talk about how I create motion and rhythm for that kind of stuff. I didn't put any flourishes in there, but as you saw me play, I do little comebacks against the bass string. We'll talk about that after we do our walkthrough. I didn't want to clutter up the tablature. Any questions on our intro and our A part? Are you running into anything weird? Anything giving you any grief so far? Nope. Okay, good. Good. Let's press on. Let's go on into the B section. This is going to be our chorus. So we're going to start with 2-1-0, the B minor, and then we get into the next page. So hopefully that's not going to be too much grief for anybody here. That 3-1-4. Basically, it's a G major chord with an A in the melody. Not too far removed from playing a T-shaped 3-1-3 chord. Yeah, go ahead. Somebody had a question out there? Okay. So yeah, 3-1-4. Hopefully that's not a big stretch. We're going to walk down with the thumb. The thumb will get you as far as the 2nd fret, and then I'm going to use my my pinky to get the 1. Now here's a change that I made, and let's talk about this right here. It's going to happen a couple of times. In measure 28, going into measure 29, first of all, we've got a push rhythm going on here. Take a look at the 1, and above it in the standard music notation, it didn't show up in the tablature. I need to go back and do this tablature again. It's an 8th note. A push rhythm is a rhythm that comes in a little bit early. So instead of happening, say a melody starts on the downbeat of a measure on 1, it gets pushed a half a beat early, or a beat early. In this case, half a beat early. And it gives a push feeling. You've heard this before in Beethoven's 9th Symphony, Ode to Joy. For most of that tune, it's dum bum 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 bum. But at one point it goes bum ba da 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 da. The note comes in a little bit early before the 1. That's a push rhythm, and that's what's happening here in near, far, wherever you are. That comes in a little earlier than the 1. So the 1 is actually an 8th note that's tied to an 8th note on the downbeat of the next measure. So we're holding that note for a total of a quarter note, a beat, but it's starting a half a beat early. So first of all, I'm sliding into the next chord from that. I'm getting into it pretty quickly, but you'll see that the next thing is it's a arpeggio going through an A major chord, 4-2-1. Over time, I've discovered that this sounds a lot better with just a simple 101 chord, and I'm not playing it as 2 8th notes. And bear in mind, it's not 2 8th notes separately. So really what you want to do is just prepare to play a 101 chord for the duration of 2 beats once you get into that measure 29. So here's how I play it. coming from the 3-1-4. So if you want to rewrite that section right there and just put 101 as a, it's not necessarily a half note, it is more, it is a dotted quarter note, basically. You're not going to do anything in that measure until you get to 2 and 3. The 4-2-1 is being replaced by a 101 chord. So after you finish, and honestly, by the time you slide down into it, it's so hard to play the push rhythm and then hit the chord an 8th note later. So in reality, you're hitting that note, that 1 on the and of 4 in measure 28, and then you're dropping a 101 for 2 beats on the downbeat of measure 29. It kind of works out that way, but I really do fight to get that 1 in early because that's exactly how the song goes. So let me play that again for you. I'm going to play it from the 101. And I'll do that again. This time I will continue on and I'll count through the 101 so that you can see how it relates to playing the 2-3 leading into the next measure. Coming from the 101. 1, 2. Okay. I just think it works a lot better to have a nice solid 101 there. But do make sure you get that 1 in at the end of the measure.